Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And you know, if you join us on a regular basis, I'm your host, Ronald Bethea, and you also know, if you join us regularly, that the slogan for this show, if it's power in numbers, then the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative, LLC, captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative, LLC, serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African-American owned renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically Black colleges and universities, to utilize HBCU campuses and Black-owned farmlands to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African men and African-American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the African and African-American community, locally and nationally, about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for more environmental education in the Black community through Black Talk Radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black Americans. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a scheduled guest today, but you can be a guest on this show, and you know how to do that if you've been following us by calling 646-668-2948. Once again, that call-in number is 646-668-2948. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being on this journey that I've been on this journey with this platform called Blog Talk Radio. We've been with Blog Talk Radio since 2016? So we're looking at 8 years. Now, we've been notified that Blog Talk Radio will no longer be providing this platform for my listening audience to hear you over the platform of Blog Talk Radio. And as you know, we have been streaming over social media, Facebook, X, and Twitter. We have moved our show to YouTube, and you can get our broadcast by logging on to our website at positivechangepc.com. That's positivechangepc.com, and scroll down. And once you scroll down, once you log on to our website, you will, by logging on to positivechangepc.com, that's positivechangepc.com, you will see that we launched several months back our new online digital podcast radio YouTube TV network. And we've been providing over our online website our podcast shows, our radio shows. You'll see several shows that we've done with Carl Nelson. Our last show was dated November the 25th, 2024. I was the lead-off guest with one of my board members from the National Association of Blacks in Solar. And if you've been following me for any time at all, you know that I am the former president of the National Association of Blacks in Solar, the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative. We're proud to say that we were one of the founder charter members of the National Association of Blacks in Solar. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that advocates on behalf of African and African American owned renewable energy companies. And the basic objectives and goals are the same that I just shared with you when we started on the show to talk about the purpose of solar now and the future with its economic impact on Black America, which were we serve as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs that affect our historically Black colleges and universities, to utilize Black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African American youth, locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change, which disproportionately affects our community and other communities, quote unquote, of color that Europeans choose to define how they see the minority population base in America. But what's very, very interesting about this is something called the browning of America. And even though we are so-called minorities, in the very, very near future, country will be 330 million plus in population, but it will be majority people of African descent and of color. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we want to jump into why we're going through this, explaining this to you, because we will have a new location for you to hear us on a weekly basis. We have not decided on what platform we will use for our podcast as of yet, but we'll be looking into that because through our YouTube, there is a podcast platform there. So we'll probably move over to YouTube, and we will also be sharing the other social media platforms that this program will be streaming live over. But you can now go to positivechangepc.com, and you'll be able to check out our online digital podcast network. Now, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, our call-in number is 646-668-2948. And as I indicated to you earlier in the show, we, in fact, don't have a special guest scheduled for today. But we, in fact, have been beating the drum on this platform around something called the Corporate Transparency Act. And we've been doing that for quite some time. So to sort of familiar our listening audience with this, we want to share what our show will be about today. We will look at the fact that the U.S. District Court of East Texas, a federal judge, halts the reporting act requirements of the Corporate Transparency Act. What is important for you to realize, ladies and gentlemen, is that this was a law that was passed and introduced by Carolyn Maloney. It was H.R. 2535. It passed through Congress under, I would say, smoke and mirrors. It was supposed to be to stop illicit business practices for businesses to launder money to fund terrorist activities. And this bill was passed through Congress. Required, if you own a business and you had under $5 million annual receipts and you had less than 20 employees, you in fact had to file with the U.S. Department of Treasury a division called FinCEN. The enforcement of this legislation was connected with the Internal Revenue Service, whereas incorporated a business before January 1, 2024, you had until December 31st of this year to file this report with FinCEN at Division of the U.S. Congress, the Office of Commerce. If, in fact, you incorporated your business after January 1 of 2024, you only had 90 days. You were to incorporate a business after January 1st, 31st of 2025, you would only have 30 days to file this report. The fines associated with not filing this report started at $500, and back in March, when the National Small Business Trade Association, which is a nonprofit organization based here in Washington, D.C., brought litigation in the 5th District of Alabama, and a federal judge ruled that this was unconstitutional. In March, covered approximately 66,000 businesses. This Corporate Transparency Act impacts between 42 and 32 million small businesses doing business in the United States of America. And it's amazing to me that it has gotten little or no coverage for an entire year. Matter of fact, when the judgment came out in March and indicated that if you were not a member of the National Small Business Trade Association as of March 1st, 2024, you could not, your business was not covered. It only covered those 66,000 members of the National Small Business Trade Association. You had to be a member as of March 1st, 2024. The fines went on to indicate $500 a day, and after that, the first judgment, the U.S. Treasury Department, for some reason, somebody said, well, let's increase it another $91. So it was $591 a day in fines for you not filing a report, which was online. Yours truly, we filed a report several months back, and we're covered because we are an LLC here in Maryland. And what happens is, if you made a mistake on the person, because you had to be very, very clear, if you own 25% or more of the company, you were the person who had to be on the bottom of the line on the application as the owner. The fines could go from the $591 a day, which when it hits $10,000, up to $250,000. And if you could not pay the fines, you could possibly receive 2 years of federal jail time. If the government found out that you put some misleading or lied on that application, knowingly or unknowingly made a mistake, and they could see where over $100,000 had flown through your bank account in the last 12 months, they could, in fact, come after you, and the fines increased from $250,000 up to $500,000, and it was 10 years of federal time. With that second count, it could be up to 5 years of federal time. So this was some serious information that no one never really broke out to the public about these fines and what this was all about. Now, as you know, I don't like to take people's words for or opinion. It just didn't make sense to me. Now, we're also going to talk about today why you had Democrats vote for a bill that will give, refer to this gentleman as COVID 45 plus 2. We know him as Donald Trump, who, very unfortunate for millions of us, his administration will be coming back into office. Now, this specific bill is H.R. 95-495. This bill states if your organization was identified by something that you said, the administration did not agree with, and they decided to give you a designation of terrorist organization, that the U.S. Department of Justice could, in fact, inform you that you had 90 days to appeal a decision. They didn't have to provide you with an explanation or any evidence of what you had done. But if you couldn't appeal that decision in 90 days, if you were a 501c3 nonprofit organization, your 501c3 status could be snatched away from you. Now, let's connect the dots. The reason why this bill was passed was similar to the same reason as the Corporate Transparency Act. As we began to drill down looking at the CTA, because we're going to connect the dots on these two bills. This specific article talks about the 52 members who, in fact, were Democrats who wanted to vote for this bill, but it was such a groundswell of calls last week here in Washington, D.C., and I know I'm right in Tacoma Park, Maryland, right outside of our nation's capital, and I place calls to my senator and to my congressman. Van Hollen is my senator. Congressman Glenn Ivey is my congressman. And I was also on a call on Thursday evening, and he was speaking to an issue that we're going to speak to today in our third segment of our show, because we've broken this down into three segments today. So, in this first segment, let's go back and connect the dots around the H.R. 2535 and H.R. 9495, okay, which is the CTA and this legislation, which in fact, so much groundswell and so many calls went into the Hill last week that by the time the vote came through the House, the number of Democrats that was supporting and actually voted went from 52 to 15. Be clear. The numbers went from 52 who were originally going to vote for this bill until their constituency found out about it and raised so much hell with their congressional office and their district offices with phone calls and emails that they backed up. Because the U.S. Department of Justice can declare your organization a terrorist organization with something you say out your mouth or someone who's supposed to be a leader of your organization said out their mouth. And they might not even be speaking on behalf of the organization. They could be preface themselves, because I've done 100 times on this show. I'm not speaking for the National Association of Blacks in Solar as the sitting president. I'm speaking for former sitting president. I was speaking as the CEO and founder of the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative, LLC, which I have the right to do so because I'm the founder and CEO. Long and short, when you connect the dots around these two pieces of legislation, you find it's all smoke and mirrors. First, let's go back to the CTA. An interesting article came out that talked about how the impact of the CTA on the real estate industry. Now, if you know anything about the real estate industry, you also know the Corporate Transparency Act required that all LLCs, limited liability corporations, file. When you begin to look at the industry, which we know as the short-term lease rental industry, most people know of this industry by two national brand names, Airbnb and Vrbo. 2023 fiscal year, Airbnb generated $8.7 billion with an app, ladies and gentlemen. That's making money. Vrbo, the next nationally known brand in the short-term lease rental industry, did $1.7 billion. In the U.S. totally, the short-term lease rental industry did $64 billion. Worldwide, internationally, the short-term lease rental industry generated $109 billion in fiscal year 2023. Now, why do you think I'm bringing this up? When you begin to connect the dots, under the Corporate Transparency Act, nonprofits were exempt. So it didn't affect them, those small nonprofits. But HR 9495 will impact them if it passes the Senate, and we're going to get back to that other aspect. This bill already passed the House. The federal injunction, which was issued, a judge from the Eastern Federal Circuit Courts of Texas declared the Corporate Transparency Act unconstitutional nationwide. Okay? Let me be clear about this. We're going to read directly from the actual article, which basically laid out the decision from the federal judge from the Eastern District Courts of Texas, December 3rd, 2024, in the case of Texas Top Cop Shop, Inc., etc., versus Garland, Inc., all federal district courts in the Eastern District of Texas issued an order granting a nationwide preliminary injunction that, number one, enjoins the Corporate Transparency Act, the CTA, including enforcement of that statute and the regulations implementing its beneficiary ownership information, reporting requirements, and specifically, number two, stays all deadlines to comply with the CTA reporting requirements. Very, very important, ladies and gentlemen. This basis for the opinion is that the CTA exceeds the U.S. Congress's powers under oath to the Commerce Clause and the necessary and proper clause, which must be in something called the Constitution somewhere. Once again, the basis for the opinion was that the CTA exceeds the U.S. Congress's powers under both the Commerce Clause and the necessary and proper clause. You need to look those up, see what those clauses say. The reason why I'm saying these things, ladies and gentlemen, is because if we can agree that COVID-45 plus 2, known as Trump, many people have referred to him as a narcissist and then very vindictive. If you look at the numbers of this 2024 election and look at the data put out by the U.S. Department of Commerce, 92% of African American women voted for Kamala Harris. 80% of African American men, which I'm one of those, also voted for Kamala Harris. And I am not a registered Democrat. I am a registered independent. I'm being clear. I'm going to be real clear about this thing. The reason why I'm making this point is, well, who did vote for Trump? 53% of white women and white males, around 75%, and Hispanic males. They voted for COVID 45 plus 2. And they put him over the top, according to the numbers. Under the popular vote, and I won't talk about looking at those 7 states and how they play games with that other portion of the government when we're going through the process of electing president. It'll come to me in a minute. But getting back to our thought patterns around the Corporate Transparency Act and the reading of the findings. Now, Trump administration, I feel strongly, will appeal this decision. Even though I feel that Trump's administration, which the bill was introduced by a Democrat by the name of Carolyn Maloney out of Upper New York State, but you need to do a little research on her and see her ties to the hotel, motel, and business sector in the state of New York. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the short-term lease rental industry is Lottie, Dottie, and everybody living in urban markets where you have a large tourist industry and a city like Washington, D.C., which is our nation's capital with the arts and museums. Everybody I know who got Airbnb, who is near a subway, stays booked. I'm not making this up, ladies and gentlemen. So the short-term lease rental industry has been kicking the hotel, motel, and Holiday Inn's ass, okay, since 2016. Folks always told me to follow the money, follow the money, follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. The hell with smoke and mirrors. The short-term lease rental industry, ladies and gentlemen, you will find in every metropolitan area that has a large enough population where they can have a professional NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball franchise, as well as you got colleges and universities that are major part of major super sports conferences such as the SEC, the ACC, the Pac-12, they used to call it the Big Ten, plus 10 more with all these schools who joined the Big Ten. And all of them we got something called the bowl season. Well, do you know the number one export in America? The number one export in America is entertainment. Where are these bowl games played? Played in your major urban markets during the holiday season. And the reason why they're played there, ladies and gentlemen, because if you go to Atlanta, you find during the so-called holidays, you find that ain't nobody in Atlanta because everybody in Atlanta from somewhere else outside of Atlanta. So what is it's become? It's become a sports mecca where the Falcons play. We just had the Celebration Bowl this past weekend. Congratulations to the Jackson State Tigers. You finally got by my homeboys, the South Carolina State Bulldogs. And hats off to the Bulldogs in Orangeburg, because I am from South Carolina originally, and I played football at Morgan State College, and I was a member of the 1971 MEAC championship football team. So I got a little history with the MEAC. It goes way back from its inception. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, getting back to our subject matter, when we begin to look at what generates the money in the hotel and motel industry, it's been people traveling to these bowl games, people going to the Super Bowl, people going to the All-Star games, baseball, basketball, people going to NBA games. That is what brings people back downtown since the so-called, we call, some folks refer to it as the pandemic. I call it the plandemic. And this is what we're working with, ladies and gentlemen. The reality of the economics that drives the U.S. economy is based on people spending money. It's consumerism. And entertainment is what people are going to spend their money on. And they have to have somewhere to stay. So when people go to these places now, they're not running into the major hotels. They're going to short-term rental lease properties that are owned by Joe Blow, people that you know. You understand? And this is what I'm trying to communicate to folks through my show, is that don't always understand why they're not covering something. Airbnb and Verbo, if you go online with their online news blog, they've been beating the drum around the Corporate Transparency Act, because you can have agreement with them to run a rental in a short-term lease rental property and get the business through them unless you incorporate an LLC. That is why I strongly believe this legislation was passed, okay? Because one thing I do know, Code 45 plus 2 hails from the state of New York. That's where he grew up. I'm quite sure there's some synergy and connections between the sponsor of this bill and Code 45 plus 2 somewhere down the line. Let's look at this, ladies and gentlemen, as we get back to the other part of this legislation. Now, as we've indicated, the Corporate Transparency Act, who and what it is. We've attempted to share this information with you about this bill, H.R. 9495, and how it ties in to H.R. 2535. As I indicated, this bill actually passed the House with 15 Democrats voting for it. Congress bill from the 118th Congress, House Bill 9495 text in the blog urging members of Congress to kill the bill. You had the president of the ACLU Senior Policy Council said, and I'm struggling with this gentleman's last name. The first name is Kia, K-I-A, last name H-A-M-A-D-A-N-C-H-Y. I don't want to change his parents' last name, but I'm struggling with that one, ladies and gentlemen. Senior Policy Council said, the freedom to dissent without fear of the government retribution is a vital part of any well-functioning democracy. which is why Congress must block H.R. 9594 before it's too late. Under the bill, once the organization is notified about its terrorist supporting designation, it would have 90 days to appeal it before it is stripped of its 501c3 status. I'm reading this directly from the blog, which was published in Newsweek. I'm quite sure y'all heard of Newsweek at some point in time if you've been on planet Earth. That's where this came from. And this was authored on November the 12th, 2024 by Catherine Fong, who reported on this. Now, this is what it says. The law would not require the Treasury officials to explain. This goes back to the U.S. Treasury Department too, ladies and gentlemen. Remember I was talking about that office called FinCEN with the CTA? Treasury officials to explain the reasoning behind this decision or for the department to provide evidence. Wait a minute. Let me get this correct. What part of this conversation am I not understanding what I'm reading? As they say, can you believe what your lying eyes is letting you concede while you read? Trump has begun filling his cabinets, but was not announced who would lead the Department of Treasury. Billionaire investor John Paulson took himself out of the possible pick on Tuesday, suggesting that investor Scott Bessent of Trump's transition co-chair Howard Lutnick would succeed current Secretary Janet Yellen. I'm quite sure some of them names sound familiar. Yeah, if you've been turning on your box, some folks call it the ignorant box. Some folks refer to it as a TV screen. I'm trying to tell you because when you listen to C-SPAN in the morning, you get your full dose early with the Democrat, Republican, and Independent line. And nobody's talking about this issue, which is impacting 42 million businesses. But the number one group and the fastest growing since 2019 in business have been young black women who voted for Kamala Harris. Now, as I brought up in my earlier conversation, if you believe that Donald Trump is a narcissist and that he is vindictive, you don't want these bills here on the books. Let me repeat myself. If you believe that COVID-45 plus 2 is a narcissist and he is vindictive, then you do not want these two bills on the books. Because if they are, like my son told me the other night, he said, Pops, you got to get you a new slogan. You can't keep saying the return of Jim Crow in 24. What you going to say in 25, you better take a dive and hurry up and go hide because COVID-45 plus 2 getting ready to drop something on you. Now, I'm trying to tell you, I'm not a poet and I don't know it, but I'm sure that if you're out there and you want to call 646-668-2948, you can call that number. That's 646-668-2948. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a slight pause for the calls here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with his economic impact on Black America. We're going to be right back here as we take a slight pause for the cause here on Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. We'll be right back. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the airways of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald Bethea, and you know if you join us on a regular basis, the slogan for this show, if there's power in numbers, then the positive change captures that power for your financial benefit. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to play something for you here while we take a quick bathroom visit here on the show. So we're going to get right to that so that we can be amenable to my listening audience. Now, we talked about the CTA, but I'm going to actually let you listen to a video while I'm taking care of some business here.
So listen, this is a huge warning to anyone that has a business or that's doing a side hustle right now, because there is a new IRS rule that just went into effect, and it will affect over 32 million businesses in the United States. But the thing is, not many business owners know about this. Not many people know about it in general. Someone recently reached out to me asking me to do a video on this topic, and so today I am going to explain everything that you need to know and do ASAP, because the deadline is approaching for this really soon, and if you end up missing that deadline, you could end up owing the government thousands of dollars or worse. So make sure you watch this entire video until the end, because you do not want to miss any of this info. Hello, bonjour, hola, aloha, konnichiwa, wagwan, shalom, assalamu alaikum, jambo, ciao, namaste. I am back with the news that you definitely can use today, because this new IRS rule just went into effect on January 1st, and I literally asked 10 people if they heard anything about this, and they said they had no idea. And I know many of you that are watching me right now probably have no idea about this either, but there are huge penalties and fines if you do not follow this rule. So today we're about to get into this, and I'm going to walk you through step by step what you need to do ASAP. But before we get to that part, let me actually explain what's going on. So there is something called a corporate Transparency Act. And this was a law that was passed in 2021. But the particular part that I'm about to tell you about didn't go into effect from this act until January 1st of 2024. But the whole point of this act was basically to try to decrease financial crimes such as money laundering, making it harder for people to hide money or to benefit from illegal gains from companies like shell companies or other company structures. So this law now requires businesses in the United States to report individuals who own or control the business. And they are to report this through a new form called the BOI, which is a beneficial ownership report. And this report is to be submitted to a specific part of the United States Treasury Department called the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, also known as FinCEN. And don't worry, I will be showing you where to go to get this form and how to actually fill it out. But just to give you an idea of the amount of people that have no idea about this new rule and this requirement, at the time of this video, only about 1 million businesses have submitted this report. However, the IRS is expecting over 32 million businesses to actually submit this. So we are way behind, y'all. And again, I'm trying to stop you from getting in trouble or having to pay the government tons of money for not filling out this form. So let's talk about the businesses or the people with side hustles that actually need to fill out this form. And the government actually considers two types of companies that have to submit this report. The first is going to be what they call domestic reporting companies. So if you have a business or if you are doing a side hustle and you actually created an LLC or you got your S Corp and you created that through a Secretary of State, then this is something you have to fill out. And if you have a sole proprietorship, you do not have to fill out this form unless it was created through a Secretary of State. Now, the next type of company that needs to fill out this report is going to be what is called foreign reporting companies. And these can be LLCs or corporations that were formed in an entirely different country. However, if you register to do business in the United States with a Secretary of State, you are required to also submit this report. Now, there are some exemptions to which businesses do not have to file this report. There's actually 23 of them. But those corporations are more so for your larger companies that has 20 or more full-time employees and that has had over $5 million in gross receipts in a year. Some other exemptions are going to be your nonprofits, banks, credit unions, insurance companies, government authorities, and inactive entities. And let me tell you something. If you have an LLC and you're like, well, I'm not doing nothing with it, I just registered the LLC and it's just sitting there, let me let you know. The only way that you are exempt from actually filling out this form is if that LLC was created before January 1st of 2020. And you also have to have not received more than $1,000 in the last 12 months. And don't worry, I am going to leave a link down below to all of the exemptions for filling out this report, and it'll have more details about who actually fall under those exemptions. But unless you are exempt, which most people are not going to be exempt, then you need to fill out this form, and the sooner the better, because you don't want to put this off, and then you forget, and guess what? You get a large bill from the government saying you owe $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. So the next thing we need to go over is who even qualifies as a beneficial owner, like who actually needs to be written on these reports that we are submitting. A beneficial owner is an individual that directly or indirectly exercises substantial control over a reporting company. And that can be someone who holds a senior office like a president, chief financial officer, general counsel, the CEO or the COO. All of that falls under that. Or another working definition of that beneficial owner is someone who controls or owns at least 25% of the company. So if it's you and another partner, y'all 50-50, both of you have to go on this report. If it's you and 3 other people, that's 4 total, and y'all equally own 25% of this, then you all have to be reported on this form. So again, that's anybody who has 25% or more ownership. If it's less than that, you don't have to worry about it. So now we need to know what those...
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm quite sure that you found out a lot of information since I'm just getting back to the show. I wanted to play that for you to show you how important this is, because COVID-45 plus 2, you may know him as your 47th president elect. I'm looking at the fact that they're going to appeal this decision. But you do not have to file this report by December 31st, 2024. And as we move forward in 2025, you don't have any other choice but to get ready to rumble, because the fight is on. 2 federal judges have already ruled. The status of H.R. 9495, I don't know what it is. I called Congressman Glenn Ivey's office. I've called Senator Van Harlan's office. I'm going to put a call back in today to find out what the status is of that bill. And when I come back on the airways of this platform, I will know what to tell you on that. We attempted to do this show last week, and we weren't able to do it. Now, I'm going to reach out to Mrs. Shalea Marcet, who's with the Department of Energy's Office of Energy, Justice, and Equity. I'm going to see if I can get her to come on my podcast to talk about what her office does and the impact it will have if it's not continued. So, with that being said, those officers play a very, very important role when you look at the fact that the Biden-Harris administration has catalyzed $1 trillion, over $800 billion through Executive Order 14008, gave rise to Build Back Better in the Inflation Reduction Act. You can find all that information on our website. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I hope that we can call Capitol Hill, our congressmen and senators, and make sure that funding is provided to codified to fund those 6 agencies, energy, equity, and justice officers throughout the 6 federal agencies. We need them to stay in place. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And you know, if you join us on a regular basis, the slogan for this show, if there's power in numbers, Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative, LLC, captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative, LLC also utilize Black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education in the African and African American community through Black Talk media and talk shows such as Solar Now and the Future, with its economic impact on Black America. Until next week, we're going to ask you to meet us back here. We want you to beat us back here as we close another exciting edition. And as we always say,